And welcome to another Stamp with Amy K YouTube Live. And today I'm going to show you how I made a card with the Stampin' Up! Fragrant Flower Stamp Set Bundle, which is one of the newer ones from the current January to April 2023 mini catalog. And it's got some really pretty coordinating designer series paper that is available in the Celebration catalog. You can get it for free with an order of $50 or greater. It's really, like I said, it's really pretty paper. I just, it's awesome paper that you can get for free from Celebration. I didn't use any of it, of course, today on my my project. I used some other designer series paper, but I figured I'd let you know that there's coordinating paper that you can cut with the dies and use with the stamp set if you want to in the Celebration catalog. So, hey, Marilyn and Pam, thanks for joining. I appreciate you being here today. So this is a card we're going to be making. It's pretty simple, just a little bit of coloring, a little bit of layering. There is actually, hopefully you can see it on here, there's a little bit of inking on the background with one of the decorative masks, and I'll show you how I did that and how I got it set up for that in just a second. But here's the stamp set. Figured we'd talk about that first. This is the Fragrant Flower Stamp Set, and this is actually available in both photopolymer and cling mount. So it depends on which one of the stamp sets that you prefer. You can take your pick in the catalog. There are 5 stamp sets in the current mini catalog that are available in both cling and photopolymer. I definitely prefer photopolymer, and it's mostly because I can see where I'm stamping, especially if it's a sentiment set. However, I know other people love the cling mount ones, so that's the nice bonus, is that you get to pick which one you like better. So, hey, Patricia, and glad you're here, and Gina Marie, and Karen, and Peggy, glad y'all are joining today. So happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I kind of forgot. I don't know, it's Tuesday and just not not at the top of my list, although I did get some very pretty flowers from my husband today, so I will have to say I did get a nice Valentine's Day present this morning. They arrived, so that was very nice. All right. All right, I'm glad you remembered, Ruth Ann. Thanks for hopping in today. So again, this is the stamp set, and again, I have the photopolymer version, but it does come in cling mount if you prefer that, which the cling mount is the one that's got the foam backing on it, and it's the red rubber, so it just depends on, again, it's your preference. You get to pick. So, hey, Drew, glad you're joining today as well. These are the Fragrant Flowers dies, and they coordinate with the stamp set. So the larger open ones here, the 2 flowers, as well as the kind of sentiment type, the label type dies, do coordinate with the stamp set. So there's the little friend and the love that you can cut out with these 2. And then this one will cut both the thanks and the hello, as well as other sentiments and things. But I know it definitely cuts those. So, and then there's this kind of background look, and then there are a couple of accessory pieces. So there's a little kind of buds and a couple of different leaves. So it's a great little die set, great little bundle. And again, it's available in the current mini catalog from Stampin' Up! So, hey, Cornella, hopefully I haven't totally said your name wrong. Thanks for joining from Austria. Hopefully you're having a good evening there. So, all right, a couple things before we get going on the card. Today is the last day for my Valentine's Day ordering bonus, where you get a free adhesive of your choice with an order of $50 or greater that you place through me, through my online store, between now and the end of the day today. So if you haven't put in your order yet, be sure you get on it. You'll get your normal $10 thank you gift that you get with any order, and you'll earn your reward points from me. And then on top of that, you're getting a little extra bonus if you order on Valentine's Day. So, hey, Marilyn, thanks for joining. If you are not currently a demonstrator, right now is a really awesome time to join. Stampin' Up! Has a great joining promotion going on. They have 3 different options for the starter kit. So the first 2, it's $129 plus tax if that applies in your area. And you get to pick either the boho blue or the white mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, and $175 worth of your choice of Stampin' Up! Products from either of the 2 current catalogs or the online store. And then there's the third option where you actually pay $99 plus tax if that applies in your area. And you still get to pick the $175 worth of merchandise. So you can pick that one if you prefer, if you already have the mini machine, or if you prefer not to get one of the mini machines. It's any of the 3, it's an awesome deal. This is probably one of the best deals that I've seen Stampin' Up! Offer since I've been a demonstrator, and I've been around a while. So, all right, let me know if you have questions about that. We'd love to have you come join us and get that great discount on your orders anyway that you're putting in. There's no requirement to sell to anybody. You get a 20% discount at least on your orders, and you get to come hang out with our team, which is pretty much I think pretty awesome. So, hey, Barbara, thanks for joining. And Marilyn is here as well. So, speaking of Celebration, hopefully you've seen the Celebration brochure, the original one that came out. There's a couple stamp sets, some designer series paper sets in it that you can get for free with orders of $50 or greater during Celebration, which runs through the end of February. Stampin' Up! Has put out some additional items that you can get and pick for free with your orders of either $50 or $100 for the month of February. So these are in addition to the products that are in the Celebration brochure. Let me know if you have any questions about that. The details are on my blog for all of these things, which is stampwithamyk.com. So you can, go check that out and read more. Drop me an email if you have any questions about anything. Hey, Penny, thanks for joining, and Carol as well. All right, so we are going to get started on the cards. So first things first, this is a piece of basic white cardstock, and it's cut to about 3.5 by about 5 inches. And what I'm going to try to do here is just line it up reasonably straight. It doesn't need to be perfect because, none of it is, on a piece of grid paper. And then I've got some Post-it note tape, or if you have the Stampin' Up! Masking paper, you can use that as well. I don't know, I just find the Post-it note tape is easy to use, and I'm kind of lazy, and so it comes off in strips like a piece of tape. And I stick it here on the very corners of this panel. And then I'm going to grab my decorative mask. This is from the Artistic Mix Decorative Masks, and there are 5 of them in here. There's like a plaid pattern. There's a couple different patterns. It's a good pack. So definitely one that you should get if you haven't seen it or don't have it already. And I'm just going to layer this over the top, and again, try to line it up so that it's fairly straight on the grid paper. Again, it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, but the grid lines on the paper do make it much easier to get it lined up and somewhat straight. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that Post-it note tape and stick it across the very top. Now, what you may not be able to see is the top of my panel of cardstock is right here, so it's underneath where I put the tape on it because I don't want a hard line on it. And that's basically why I stuck the tape where I did, is I put the very corners of it on here and then across the top here so that it's not creating a harsh line on here where I'm trying to add the ink for the masking. So if you want the harsh line, you certainly can put your masking tape right over the top of it, but I didn't want that. So sorry about that. Somebody's calling, of course, in the middle of the video. So I have got gray granite ink and a blending brush, and just going to add a little bit of gray granite ink over the top of my panel here. And just going to put it, again, I didn't want it to be like a super filled in and every single dot. I just sort of wanted a little bit of a, kind of a hint that there was some inking on the background of it. So I've just taken my blending brush and running that across the top. And then I'm going to lift it because I have it secured on the top with my tape. I can lift it and kind of see what I've done here so far. Hopefully you can see there's a little bit of color on here, but I want it to get a little bit darker. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue to add layers of ink on. Again, I've got gray granite and a blending brush that I'm adding the ink with. And Stampin' Up! Has got some new mini blending brushes. If you haven't seen them, they're in the mini catalog. For this project, a big one worked just fine, so I didn't pull out one of the mini ones, but they have some, they're about, about a third of the size of this, which is pretty awesome for making smaller patterns and that sort of thing. So, all right, so that's kind of the look that I wanted with it. I may put a little bit more ink down here in this corner, but again, didn't want it to be too defined, didn't want it to be every single spot, but that's sort of the look I was going for with it. All right, so hopefully you can see that on here. I'm going to close that up and set it aside. And then I'm going to peel off my layers here and throw all that masking tape over here. And again, I use Post-it note tape. You can buy it at any office supply store. You can get it online at Amazon and all those places. So, or you can use, like I said, the masking paper from Stampin' Up!, but this is cut into 1-inch strips, and they're kind of perfect for a lot of the things that I do. So, all right, so I've got this panel that I've got inked here. And then, rather than wasting a whole piece of designer series paper that nobody was going to see under here anyway, I cut some little strips of designer series paper to save it and conserve a little I don't conserve a lot of things, but some things I do. I don't know. Designer papers are one of those things that I try to use as little as possible because I know that I'm always going to want to use it again, that piece later. So these strips are cut to about 1/2 inch by about 4.5 inches long. And I'm just going to go here on the edge of my panel that I've just put the ink on. And again, I'm going to use my grid paper to line this up. So I'm going to try to get it lined up straight here. Whoop, there we go. On the grid paper, line up the inked panel as well. Try to get it lined up straight here in either of the corners. And then it should give me about 1/4 inch sticking out on either side of it. So that is what my plan was with this, is just to have a little peek of the designer paper without having to use a whole bunch of it. So I'm, again, going to do the same thing on the other side. Line it up here, get it lined up straight, and set up even with one of the lines here on the top. And then I'm going to grab my paper, and we're just going to stick it right over the top, line it up in the corners, line it up with the grid line, and then that should be all set and good to go. So, oh, thanks so much. I'm glad you're liking the card. So then I'm going to take a little bit of Stampin' Seal, and we're just going to run it all over the background here. And I've got a thick basic white card base. This one is cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2 across the top. This will also work with your standard book fold card. So if you prefer that card base to the top fold one that I prefer, you can definitely use it on a regular 5 1/2 by 8 1/2 scored at 4 1/4 card base. So it just depends on which one you prefer. Sorry for wiggling the screen there a little bit as I was sticking it down, but we got that stuck directly to the card front. Then I'm going to do a little bit of stamping and coloring. So I did do one of the flowers ahead of time so you didn't have to sit and watch all of this being done. But the larger of the two flowers, I figured I'd show you how I did that one. And this one was colored the exact same way, stamped the same way. I used basic gray ink, and this is the larger flower image from the Fragrant Flower stamp set. And again, this is the stamp set that is available in both cling mount and photopolymer. So if you prefer the cling mount stamps to the photopolymer, you can take your pick and pick your favorite for the 5 stamp sets in the catalog that are available in both. All right, got that stamped down here. And I'm going to close that up before I stick my fingers or something else in it, and then pull a couple of Stampin' Blends markers over. So, hey, Carol, thanks for joining. So I've got So Saffron that I'm going to be using for the flower images. And again, I'm starting with the light. Hopefully, yep, that's the light. Just wanted to make sure before I started coloring everything. And I know that this marker is one that I use a lot. I actually was worried about it running a little bit low on ink, so I have a spare sitting over here to my side. So if I speedy quick change markers, you'll know that it ran out of ink. I know this one's getting down there because So Saffron, for whatever reason, is one of those colors that I use an awful lot. It's one of my favorites. So what I do with this when I am coloring the larger images like this is I start with the lighter color, and I basically just get ink across almost all of the image, and then I come back in with the dark, and I go into the places where Stampin' Up! Has already put kind of the shading and the lines, and I put a little bit of dark ink down in there, anywhere where there's little lines at. And the stamp is waterproof. It's photopolymer, so waterproof, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's waterproof, but it I know that there are some techniques that people like to do with the cling mount stamps. One of them is coloring directly on the stamp with a Stampin' Right marker or a water-based marker. So maybe it is waterproof because that does not work particularly well on photopolymers. The ink kind of beads up and it doesn't stay on the stamp as nicely as it does with cling mount. So if that's one of those things that you like to do, then oh, the ink, okay, it doesn't smudge because of the markers. Okay, so this ink actually is water-based ink. So if I used regular Stampin' Right markers, which are water-based, it would smear the ink. But because the Stampin' Blends markers are alcohol-based, it actually doesn't, so the two don't interact. So that's kind of nice, is you can really stamp in almost any of the Stampin' Up! Colors and then color them with Stampin' Blends and get sort of a little different look. You don't always have to use the Tuxedo Black Memento ink that we often use when we're using Stampin' Blends or alcohol-based markers. So, hey, Mary. Okay, all right. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully I'm answering your question, Drew. So, All right, so what I am doing with the light markers, I'm just kind of coming back over and just sort of flicking the image a little bit, not really even coloring it in, just trying to make sure there are not really extremely harsh lines on it. So that's my only goal with coming back in with the light Stampin' Blends over that. Then again, I'm just going to do the same process for the larger flower here, the second flower in this image. Again, just putting the light Stampin' Blends marker sort of all over it. And again, I'm not even taking a lot of time and coloring it really neatly and making sure every single space is filled in, because again, this is one of those images. First of all, it's a nature image. And secondly, it's a little more artistic looking, so I don't feel like it needs to be colored in perfectly. But if you're a person who really likes to color and can spend hours in getting all the shading exactly right, this is one of those images you can do it with. I don't know, I just like to put the color on it and until it looks pretty to me, and then I stop coloring, and that's kind of how I do it. So again, coming back in with the dark, so Saffron Stampin' Blends, and coming in and sort of putting the little lines in around the stamped image. All right. And I think we'll call that good with the dark. So, hey, Pat, thanks for hopping in. So again, I'm just going to take the light and just sort of scribble over the darker and try to blend it a little bit and try not to have any extremely harsh lines in it. All right. Oop, and I see a little spot there where I didn't even color the petal. All right, and we're almost done with this flower. The good thing about kind of going back and forth between the light and the dark is you can always come back in and add a little bit of dark if you feel like you need it or if you've missed anything. But I usually tend to start with the lighter and then add a little bit of dark and then come back in if I need to and feel like I need to put in a little bit of light. I can always come back in and add a little bit of light, a little bit of dark, a little bit of light, a little bit of dark, and usually get what I'm looking for in color on it. So, all right, so same thing, just coloring in a couple of the little flowers here. And then I'm going to grab, I've got soft seafoam for the green for the leaves, and just going to, again, I'm starting with the light, going to trace around the edges of the leaves and fill them in. And I'm just going to do a couple of the leaves at a time here. Usually when I'm coloring with the blends, I try not to do like the entire thing completely in the light before I stop and switch over to the dark, just because it works a little bit better for blending if your inks are a little bit wet yet. So usually I'll come back in and, maybe do a couple of the leaves at once, come back in with the dark and then blend the light and then move on to the next set. So, and again, I'm just sort of taking the dark in the areas where Stampin' Up! Has kindly put the shading and lines on the leaf image, so they make it easy. For most of the florals that we have, they're pretty easy to color, just because they put all the shading in, or a lot of the shading in for us, and all we have to do is kind of follow the lines. So again, same thing on the little stems, and then the one larger leaf we've got left here. Gonna fill that in. And then might as well just go ahead and get this one done too while I'm at it. And then I'll come back in with the dark, do a little bit of shading in the areas where I feel like it needs a little bit of darkening. Kind of around the flowers, down the center of the leaf, a little bit under the stems. And then come back in and do a little bit of shading with or a little bit of blending with the light. And we're going to call this good. All right, so that's it. So pretty simple. Again, I don't tend to spend a ton of time coloring. I just color it till I think it looks pretty, and then I'm done. All right, so I'm grabbing the Fragrant Flowers dies, and I'm going to die cut this larger image here. So I'll be off screen for 1 second, and I'll be right back. But my die cutting machine is set up off to this side so that I don't wiggle the table too much as I'm die cutting things. So hang on a second, I'll be right back. Okay, so we've got our die cut image here, and then again the one that I had done ahead of time. So I'm going to grab my card. Whoops. What did I just throw on the floor? I don't know. Something just went flying on the floor, but it's all good. I don't think it's any part of the card. Who knows? All right, so I'm going to grab some Stampin' Dimensionals and just going to stick them all over the backing. I do chop my Stampin' Dimensionals in half, and I know that some of you love that and some of you do not. So it's definitely up to you whether you prefer to have the whole dimensionals, use the mini dimensionals, or cut them in half. So use color blender with the markers. Do you use product with the barn image you colored? I don't know. I mean, the blender pens are a totally different type of ink, so I don't know what I did with the barn image. I don't know, I don't remember using the blender pens. I don't use them very often. I use the blends and the color lifter a lot, so the color lifter works with the blends markers, but the blender pens are designed to use with the regular Stampin' Up! Inks. So these are alcohol based, so they're totally different. The blender pens, I don't even remember, it's glycerin and something else that's in it, so I'm not sure that they would work very well together. So, all right, and I've got my flower images that I'm sticking together here on the card front with Stampin' Dimensionals. And then we are gonna stamp the sentiment. So let me grab my Versamark ink, and again, my sentiment here, and I've got gold embossing powder from the Metallics embossing powders. So we're going to ink that up and stamp it here on the basic white panel that I've got. All right. And then grab the gold embossing powder. Oops, and then I smacked right into the camera. So I use little Ziploc containers to keep my embossing powders in. It keeps it kind of contained and easy to sprinkle, and then I can just basically tip it right back into the container. It doesn't make a huge mess, and usually I remember to put the lid on it, and then it doesn't fly everywhere when I turn the heat tool on too. All right, so we've got our embossing powder on here, getting rid of a couple little extra flecks, and then I'm going to grab the Stampin' Up! Heat tool. And the Stampin' Up! Heat tool has two settings on it. There's a level 1 setting for drying, so if you're doing something like watercoloring or something that the ink takes a little minute to dry, you can use the level 1 setting to speed that process up. And then level 2 setting gets a little bit hotter, so it actually will heat emboss and melt the embossing powders, which is what we're going to be doing here. So it does take a second for the heat tool to heat up, and so I apologize about the racket, but it just needs a second to get warm in order to be able to use it and get it to heat emboss. So, all right, so I'm going to turn it towards the image here and see if they're warm enough yet. Yep, looks like it's going there. So as you're heat embossing, you'll see the image get kind of smooth and shiny, and then you know it's done. You don't want to overheat your embossing powder because you can burn it, and then it turns brown and not very pretty. And then you also want to give it just a second before you touch it or die cut it or do anything with it, because it will smear as well if it's a little too warm. All right, so I have got the banner die, or one of the banner dies from the Fragrant Flowers dies, and I'm just going to run this through the die cutting machine as well, so to cut out our sentiment for the card front. So there we go, we've got our sentiment die cut. And then I'm going to grab some Stampin' Dimensionals, and I'm going to be a little bit careful about the placement of them. I'm going to make sure that they're towards the outside edges, and then I'll put a little bit of Stampin' Seal in the middle so that hopefully I'll be able to get it adhered down so that it's fairly flat on the card front, and don't have dimensionals stuck anywhere where it's double stacked in one spot and not in others. So let me grab a Stampin' Dimensional for this corner, and then I will show you how I handily cut mine in half. I basically just take it and cut straight down the row in the middle, and then I get twice as many Stampin' Dimensionals out of each of the sheets, which is an awesome little bonus. And then it cuts up the edges and all that stuff too when you cut them that way. So I'm going to take a little bit of Stampin' Seal. Whoops, I've got dimensional backing stuck on everything. A little bit of Stampin' Seal and run it right here in the middle of the sentiment because it's going to be hopefully sticking on some parts of these flowers. And Stick the sentiment on the card front. I think we'll go with it about there and hope we get it on here straight. All right, and then I've got some of the pastel adhesive back sequins. And a happy Valentine's Day. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and stick a couple of them sort of around the card front like I have over here. Got one over here by the sentiment, got one up here on the other side of the sentiment, and then a couple of the smaller ones. I'll take one, stick it over here, one, put it down here, and then another one, and we'll put it up here, kind of close to the edge. And then we will call it good for the card front. The inside of the card, I'm also going to keep pretty simple. I've got a piece of basic white cardstock and basic gray ink again, and this same image that I stamped on the card front. And we're just going to ink it and stamp just the edge of it on the basic white panel. This piece of basic white cardstock is cut to about 4 by 5 1/4. And again, it's my personal preference. I like to put a layer on the inside of my cards as well. If you don't prefer to do that, you definitely can stamp directly on the card base, whatever it is that you prefer to do. But I like to have a little layer on the inside. I don't know, I think it looks a little bit more finished, but again, that's just my personal preference. And then we got some Stampin' Seal that we are going to adhere this to the inside of the card with. And we're going to be all done for today. All right, stick the two pieces together here. I'm going to fold it in half and grab my bone folder and do a quick crease here. And that's it for the card. So, card we made today, card I made ahead of time, pretty much turned out hopefully close to the same. A little different on the exactly where everything lands on it, but basically, I don't know, it's handmade, so we get to do that. So I'm glad y'all are liking the card, and happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. I'll plan to be back live on Friday around 2 o'clock Eastern time on my YouTube channel. And then next week, Tuesday, my daughter has a dentist appointment at 2:30, so I'm probably going to have to change the time on it. I don't know for sure if it's going to be like earlier in the day, like 10 o'clock in the morning, or if I'm going to go at 1 o'clock. Once I get the schedule figured out for the day, I will definitely post and let y'all know when to watch out for me next week, Tuesday. But I'll be back at 2 o'clock Eastern time on Friday. And hopefully by Friday, I'll know what time I'll be able to go live on Tuesday. So thanks for joining. All the details for this are going to be posted on my blog tomorrow, which is stampwithamyk.com. And I will link up directly to the blog post once it goes live around 8 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesday morning. So if you want to stop over and take a peek at anything, look at the measurements on anything, grab the PDF to make the card yourself, you can certainly do that. So let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate y'all being here. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.